So I'm going to start to record. All right. And I'm sharing my screen. So welcome everyone. I just wanted to say thank you for joining us this morning, and give me just a second because I don't have my notes in front of me and I thought I did. So please excuse me while I find them. Pardon me.
All right, now we see it.
Yeah. Yeah, let me close those notes and pull up these notes that you can't see. All right, thank you. So my name is Beth Mizell, and I am the program director for Blue Ridge PRISM, and I am joined here today by Rowena Zimmerman. She's also with Blue Ridge PRISM, and she'll help host today's meeting. Rowena leads our communications and outreach, having joined PRISM this year in June. I'm also joined by William Hammerski, a PRISM volunteer on our leadership team, and he will help to manage all of your great questions. Rod Walker is also joining us today, and he'll give us a brief PRISM update here in a few minutes. Today, Blue Ridge PRISM is pleased to join to host Rebekah Wallace with the University of Georgia Center for Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health. Rebekah will be discussing EDDMapS, a web-based tool for reporting and tracking invasive species. So thank you to Rebekah and to all of you in the audience for joining us today. So a few things before we get started today. A few reminders on upcoming PRISM events. Today's meeting is wrapping up our events for 2021. So we are planning already our winter meeting, which will be in early January, and backed by popular demand for the third year in a row, we're going to do our Q&A session on the control of winter invasives in the winter. And also look out for our spring workshops. Tentative for early March. We'll also be hosting our workshops in person and virtually again this year. So stay tuned and we'll make those announcements in later this year. Just a couple of housekeeping. We're all pretty Zoom savvy these days. We're going to ask you to send your questions to the Q&A box today. And we'll make time throughout the presentation. After Rod's presentation, we'll make time for questions. And then after Rebekah's presentation today, we'll make time for questions. So if you have questions for either of them, send them to the Q&A box. And William and I will work to get those questions to our speakers. So we'll ask you to hold off on raising your hand. We may have time for live questions at the end of the session, but please direct all of your questions to the Q&A box. You can find that by hovering your cursor at the bottom of your screen. The Q&A will pop up and you can put your question there. And we have tried to allow plenty of time for questions, but unfortunately, we may not get to every question today. Our speakers will be providing contact info in their presentations, but you can always reach out to us for additional questions, info@blueridgeprism.org or on Facebook. And so find us on Facebook and like us, follow us. Lots of good content that's coming out on that platform. And we also have a new Twitter account too. So you can find us on Twitter these days and Instagram. And as you leave today's meeting, if you have to leave early, I will ask you to please take a moment to complete an exit survey. Rate us and tell us how PRISM can best serve you today and in the future. And as a reminder, we're recording this meeting. We'll put it on YouTube and send out some resources to you. So at this point, I'm going to stop with my presentation and turn the meeting over to Rod Walker. Rod is the current PRISM president, and he is the founder of Blue Ridge PRISM. And he is going to give us an update on what PRISM has been doing for the past few months. Thank you, Rod.
Thank you, Beth. Welcome, everybody. I hope everybody's healthy and vaccinated and enjoying this fabulous weather. I'm going to just really quickly go through just a handful of slides talking about current PRISM activities, the fundraising, and just see if anybody's got any questions around the PRISM itself before turning it over to our main presentation, our main speaker, Rebekah, talking about EDDMapS. So for the PRISM update, just in terms of general activities, in terms of, we do quarterly meetings, and this is one of them. So this is our fourth one for the calendar year. So we've done our after today, we'll have done our 4 quarterly meetings. In terms of tabling events, those are largely all still on hold. Speaking engagements, we only did 10 last year as with the chaos of the pandemic, but this year, we're back up to a more robust number. We've done 22 so far and probably a couple more to go. We've done our 10 workshop sessions this year, which is about normal. We've been publishing our quarterly newsletters. We've got lots of materials available on our website. And if you look at all the events that we've had this year, we have a record total attendance of over 1,800 people versus only 1,100 last year. And typically it was only about 1,100 in the prior years. So this is a big step up. And that doesn't even count this year, the more than 7,000 people who have attended other events where the PRISM was a sponsor. So it's been a pretty good year so far. Delighted, we made a lot of progress on a lot of fronts, and we now have over 2,800 people on our email list. So hopefully after today we'll have a few more. So in terms of, if I can figure out how to get the slides to advance here. Why is this not moving? There we go. Okay. Other landowner activities. We've done some financing programs in the past, most of which are coming close to the end. We've had a 5-year program with the NRCS, with the Regional Conservation Partnership Program. That we're in the final year of that program. We just finished year 4 of a 5-year grant through the DuPont settlement process and the federal government. So this was year 4 in 2021. So we got another, we'll do some more of that next year for treating wavy leaf grass at 6 sites. Likewise, we have another year to go on our U.S. Forest Service grant that we got through the Department of Forestry to treat wavy leaves at some additional sites. We're going to be looking for more funding to continue these programs going forward, particularly the ones with wavy leaf. So stay tuned, and that'll be one of our new activities going forward, is to find more funding there. So some other important activities going on. We have a study underway with the Virginia Department of Transportation. It kicked off last January. We were one of the primary instigators of this happening. So in this study, VDOT is literally, they've hired Virginia Tech to sample hundreds of roadside plots all over the state to analyze what kind of plants are growing there, both natives and non-natives, or I should say both native and invasives, with the view of coming back to VDOT with specific recommendations on changing their planting list to move toward planting native plants, fewer non-natives and no invasives. So all those things have been on VDOT's planting list. It's been mostly non-native plants for a long time. So hopefully this will move VDOT to put out a lot more native plants on our roadsides as this study concludes and moves into pilot implementation. So the study's got at least another year to go, but after that, presumably it'll move into some pilot implementations. The PRISM is one of 5 organizations that got some legislation passed in the last legislature, asking the VDACs and DCR, that's the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, and the Department of Conservation and Recreation, to convene a working group to make recommendations on how to stop the sale of invasive plants because a lot of the invasive plants that are listed by DCR on their list of 90 plants, a lot of those plants are for sale by the nursery trade. You can go down and buy them at Lowe's and other places. So, you know, for the last 5 months, we've been having a monthly meeting of a working group with 15 or 20 members representing industry groups and universities and conservation groups and governmental entities studying this question. And presumably by the end of the year, we'll make recommendations back to the legislature on what should be done to reduce or stop the sale of invasive plants within Virginia. So stay tuned on that one. We've been very active in getting more plants put on the noxious weeds list. A year ago, we had the list of 6 plants added. We're now working on the next round of 10 or 12 plants to go through the about 2-year approval process. So stay tuned on that. There's always more work to be done there. If anybody's interested in participating and helping to prepare the fairly detailed nomination forms that are required to nominate a plant for the for the noxious weed list. So it's a lot of work, but we're making progress. We've had a drone project going on with UVA for a year or two now, where the concept here is to fly a drone with a very special camera over a large piece of property and capture the wavelengths of light coming into each pixel. So if you can picture the pixels as being literally a couple of inches on a side, and each pixel is picking up, I think it's 240 different wavelengths of light. We then analyze each pixel to see what plants we can detect through their spectral signatures, and then study that data and hopefully produce a map of the occurrence of individual species across the property. So they're currently focused on dealing with ailanthus and autumn olive and 1 or 2 others as their trial plants. It looks somewhat promising, but it'll take another year probably to get conclusive, useful results out of it. But it's encouraging. The PRISM is also actively engaged in terms of helping to deal with the spotted lanternfly, which is a new insect pest that's arrived in Virginia in the last couple of years. It's like the stink bugs. It's the next bug we're all going to learn to hate. But it has a bigger problem, which is that it feeds on vineyards and orchards, the grapevines and orchard trees. It's a sapsucker. But it turns out its #1 favorite plant out of almost 100 that it will feed on. Its #1 favorite plant is ailanthus, tree of heaven. And there's a small study that's been done that shows that if the ailanthus is removed, you get far fewer egg masses produced in the course of the season. In fact, if ailanthus is present, you get 7 times as many egg masses. So there's a general recommendation being made that it really probably does make sense to remove, or I should say at least kill your ailanthus before the bug arrives. So we're working to try and get that word out. So stay tuned. I'm sure if you haven't heard about this before, I'm sure you're going to hear a lot more. Likewise, if any of you out there are interested in forming another PRISM, we have help available to do that. That's something that we're eager to make happen. From a fundraising standpoint, the PRISM is funded 100% by grants and donations. We have 2 matching grants that we get annually that are the core of our funding, one from the Virginia Environmental Endowment and another from a family foundation. Each of them is for $20,000, and each of them requires us to do a 1-for-1 match. So that all comes from people like you, if you will. In November, we're going to reapply for our next round of the VEE, Virginia Environmental Endowment Grant. With regard to the Family Foundation, we're expecting to hear positive news on our annual award literally any day now, which means it'll become the foundation of our Q4 fundraising campaign, which will then kick off. So yeah, stay tuned. You may see something coming from us seeking donations, which can be made through our website, or by mail. So and thank you all. I'm sure there's people on here who have donated in the past. We really appreciate your support for everything we're doing here. So just a couple of quick reminders. I'm sure Beth will do some of these too, which is there's one last workshop left. There's a 2-hour session the evening of October 26th, next week, through the Albemarle County Public Schools Open Doors program. If you want to, so I just had an attendee poll show up in the middle of my screen. If you want to attend that, you can go to our website to see the registration link. The blueridgeprism.org is our website where you can get more information on workshops, other events, make donations, questions, or if you need a speaker for your group, just send a request into info@blueridgeprism.org. So other than that, I'll just ask Beth or whether there happens to be any questions on this subject, and if not, she can move us along to our featured presentation.
All right, thank you, Rod. I don't think we have any questions that have come in. Oh wait, we do have a question. Let me. More of a comment about Atlantis, Rod, from Kathy. Anytime you mention removing Atlantis, emphasize that if it is cut down and not poisoned or using herbicide, it will make a huge number of new trees.
Yes.
Either treat the stump or don't cut it. So, yes.
And in fact, instructions and fact sheets around this topic are available on our website as well as from other organizations. So yes, you don't want to just cut it down. That will cause it to root sprout, and you could get 100 back. So good point.
Yes, thank you, Kathy. And Rod, we did have the attendee poll that came up during your talk. I think somebody hit a button too soon, but we asked everyone if they had used EDDMapS before and trying to get a good sense of the experience levels before. So Rod, that was all the questions that we had.
Sounds good. It's all yours, Beth. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to just take a moment to share the results of the attendee poll that popped up. So thanks everyone for taking a second to answer that question. So we had 25% of the those who responded that have used EDDMapS. So, and we have 75 people that responded that are new to EDDMapS. So I'm glad that each of you are here to learn more about EDDMapS and mapping invasive plants here in Virginia, and to talk with Rebekah Wallace today.
All right. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes,
my name
Sorry,
is Rebekah.
I got lost in where I was going next today. May I give you an introduction, Rebekah?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Rebekah Wallace is the EDDMapS coordinator and Bugwood Images coordinator for the University of Georgia Center for Invasive Species and Ecosystem Health, or Bugwood. Rebekah joined the center in 2011. She graduated from Abraham Baldwin Agricultural College in 2005 with an associate's in agriculture, the University of Georgia in 2007 with a bachelor's in agri-science and environmental systems, and in 2009 with a master's in crop and soil sciences with an emphasis on weed science. In 2010, Rebekah worked at Henderson Beach State Park in Destin, Florida as an AmeriCorps member, where she scouted and identified native and invasive plant species, presented interpretive programs, and developed invasive plant identification and reporting material. She has a particular interest in data sharing and preservation and works to ensure that data is accurate and broadly available. And if you haven't been to Henderson Beach State Park in Destin, Florida, it is stunning, and I envy you, Rebecca, for getting to work there. So
Yeah, it was great. Just a little story about that. So before I got down there, the park services specialist was the one kind of preparing me for the job, and she said, well, we don't really have many or any invasives. We get the occasional tallow tree come in, but you know, that's about it. And I got down there and started looking around, and I said, they're not going to let me back out anymore, because I was finding all kinds of stuff that they were not aware of. The biggest one being Kogon grass, which is a really, really bad species to have to deal with. But luckily we found it before it had really spread too far in. So I guess it's a good thing they invited me down.
yeah.
So
Thank you, Rebecca.
Yeah. So with regards to the poll, one thing that that some people may not realize is, for a while there were a number of different regional projects we were part of. And so some people may know us as the Outsmart Invasives app or the Maiden app. We took over the iPaint app for a while until that went away. The Seedon app, the I've Got One app, and so on and so forth. So some of you may be familiar with those different programs that we were a part of, and those programs one by one are going away. And the reason is because having a uniform brand allows us to have a uniform message across the country and into Canada, actually. And so any materials we make can now be branded just as EDDMapS, rather than having to make Outsmart materials and Maiden materials and so forth. So some of you may be familiar with those other apps we were part of. And like I said, those are going away in favor of the EDDMapS app, which I'll be going over later in my talk. But I want to talk about the website first, because there are several things you do through the website that you don't do through the app. But the app is where the majority of your data will probably be taken. So I will start with the website. And can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sometimes I get the green box and sometimes I don't. Okay, so this is the, let me make that a little bit bigger. I have a very large screen, so makes things very small sometimes. The EDDMapS website, you can go to eddmaps.org, EDDMapS.org. And this is kind of the place where you can really start interacting with EDDMapS. And we do a lot of invasive species work with regards to mapping and data and so forth. But we also do take in data for some native species that are invasive in other areas of the country or in other habitats. And we also take in some agricultural pest data and biocontrol data. So we do have a biocontrol specific website, but we are working to make biocontrol data be able to be submitted through our website and app. So when you first come to the EDDMapS website, you see these lovely, scrolling pictures here. You can scroll down the page and you can learn a little bit about EDDMapS and get to some different resources we have and see some brief statistics and so forth. But what a lot of people come to EDDMapS for are kind of maybe 3 or 4 things. They want to see maps of invasive species or other types of species. They want to report a species, or they want to get data. We have several other things you can do. Like we have a tab up there for species information, and some people do come to us looking for that that type of information. But reporting, looking at existing maps, and getting data are really the 3 main things people interact with our website for. So I'll go ahead and start with looking at the maps, because you know, those are what a lot of people come to our website for. So when you first click on distribution maps, this is what you're seeing. You can click on any of these pictures to narrow things down. So if you just want to see what wildlife we have, you can click on wildlife, and then you get additional options. And the table below will now only show wildlife species. If you click on reptiles, it's going to restrict that table to reptiles. I'm going to just refresh it so that we can see the full list of species again. And I'm going to pick out Leafy Spurge. And so we'll just open up a new tab there. So this will show you a kind of state province level map of the US and Canada for presence of leafy spurge. Anywhere that's green, that's where at least one record of leafy spurge exists. We take in observation data, we take in all different kinds of data. So someone somewhere has said leafy spurge exists. And you can mouse over these different options, these different states and provinces, and a little pop-up will come up saying how many positive reports there are. We do take in absence data as well. So I'll get to that in a little bit when I start going through the reporting forms. So at least one positive report in these different states. At the top under the heading for leafy spurge, there's several different buttons you can press that takes you to different maps or different other types of things relating to that species. So if we click on counties, this will show up as a map of county and county equivalent places where leafy spurge has been reported as positive. So when you look at the state level map, it looks kind of like, oh my God, it's everywhere. But if you open up the county level map, you can see, oh, it's you know, there's one report in that state, or there's only a few reports. So it's not as, you know, taking over the country as you might think from a state level map. That's why we like these county level maps as well. So again, this is the green is saying it has been found here at least once. And you can, again, mouse over and see how many times it's been reported in those counties. You can actually click on it and it'll open up the list of species, a list of records in that county if you wanted to see who's reported it in those particular counties. With clicking on the counties button, you can see it opened up a second row of buttons under the first row. So it automatically sends you to the distribution map, but there are a few other options. Now, not every species has those additional options. Some of them are data that was given to us to create maps for certain species. But I'll go through them real quick. So record density. So one of the things I was talking with some of the panelists before everyone came in is that a lot of data does not have an abundance type information with it, a quantity, infested area, density, and so forth. So to give people an idea at just a glance of what is kind of going on in a county, we created this record density map. So this is the number of reports in those different counties. So yeah, you can mouse over them and you can see them kind of one by one, but this will tell you at a glance like, oh, there's a lot of data in, you know, certain counties and very few in others. So one record in Williamson County, Illinois, compared to, you know, Cassia County, Idaho, with 1,500 records. So this gives you a kind of at a glance view of what's going on with this particular species, since a lot of the data we have doesn't have abundance type information with it. And then there's a legend in the top right, so you can see what the different shades of green, you know, bin to. So 1 versus 2 to 10 and so forth. The next map is literature versus observation. This takes you to, just kind of gives you an idea of, does the data come from only an observation record, only a literature record, or both? A literature record would also include herbarium and museum data, but a lot of times it ends up being journal articles and so forth. And any way to, okay, so question, any way to normalize data density by actual number of people looking versus just density? You can download the data and create that map yourself, but we don't have a map that says how many reporters have reported. That would be kind of interesting because we do have, as a lot of people who run these types of programs know, there will be super users and there'll be people who've only used it once. So iNaturalist has it, eBird has it, so forth. You're going to have people who use a ton and people who use it once and never go back to it again. So in this particular case, there's a lot of data that has both observation, which is someone went out and saw it and reported it through some sort of database, as well as a data from herbarium and so forth. Future range and future certainty are two maps where you get an idea of what this species is going to be doing in the years 2040 to 2060. So this is data that came to us from modelers, and they ran, I believe, 895 species for habitat suitability and climate and so forth. And so this gives you an idea where this species may be. In this particular map, you're looking at 4 different options for colors. Orange means expansion, which means EDDMapS doesn't have data there right now, but it's predicted that species will exist there in 2040 to 2060. Light purple is it's been reported there, it's predicted to still be there. Dark purple is it's been reported there, but it's not expected to be there in 2040 to 2060. And then white means it hasn't been reported there and it's not predicted to be there. So this looks pretty stark. You're looking at this and you're thinking, oh my God, Leafy Spurge is going to absolutely take over the country. Hide your children. But if you look at the top left, there's number of models. So you can, So you can change the number of models to see how many agree on these particular counties having these presents. So in this case, at least one model says this species will be there. So only one of the 13 models in a county has to say it's been there. If we change that, you're going to quickly see that it's going to retract back into kind of the north. And if we actually go all the way to 13 models, when you look at 13 models, they're only agreeing in a few counties in Minnesota that it will exist. Not all of them are agreeing anywhere else. So it's an interesting map to kind of play with, and it does interact with the data in EDDMapS with regards to the colors. For future certainty, this takes our data, the existing data out of it, and it's just how many models say it will be where. So this gives you a kind of heat map of where this species is expected to be. So these types of maps can be useful for figuring out, okay, do we need to prioritize certain species? Should we be on the lookout for certain species and so forth? And as I said, these are just for certain plant species, not all. So Kogon grass doesn't have a map, but some other ones do. And then finally, this is the last one I'm going to go over. This is our point map. So these are data with some sort of coordinates associated with them, some sort of polygon, some sort of line or a point. With a line or polygon, the shape is represented by the centroid on this particular map. So with Leafy Spurge, we've got a lot of data. There are over 100,000 positive records, meaning someone just said, I saw it. There's 1,700 treated records, meaning someone treated it at the time they reported it. So they mowed it, they sprayed herbicide, they pulled it, whatever. 209 points that are considered eradicated. So someone went out there and hadn't seen it for a very long time, but they knew it used to be there. Maybe some treatment was done. And then negative means, as far as they know, it's not here and it hasn't been here. Sometimes negative can be used for certain species like usually not plants, but animals, wildlife, insects, things like that, where they move. So they might say it's negative, but the population might come in and out of that area. So it's not there yet, or it's not there at this point in the season. You can scroll in on these points. You can click on them. You can get a little bit of information about any particular record. You can kind of see with the icons representing the cluster of points, kind of what this, what's kind of represented in those points with regards to the different colors. So those are the basic maps that are available for most people to kind of look and interact with. I don't have the chat up, so let me see here. So in this particular case, that's the distribution maps. So I'll go ahead and go to report sightings. Again, this is kind of one of the other major places people go to in our database. With reporting sightings, you would first pick the type of species you're going to be reporting: plant, insect, disease, wildlife. And it's insects with like an asterisk, because there are things like mites and spiders and stuff in there. So it's the broad idea of an arthropod, really. So we'll just pick plant, and we'll go ahead and pick Massachusetts. So it's just going to come up with the plant reporting form. So the plant form is a little different from the other forms. They're all kind of different from each other with regards to this infestation section, because you're not going to have these types of plant descriptions for insects. You're going to have some different options for diseases and so forth. The first thing to note is red fields are required. There are a lot of fields on here that are optional. Only the red fields are required. So you would say you have to pick out a species. So in this case, we're going to just choose the top one. It automatically sets it to positive for the status. So if you mouse over the little question marks, it'll tell you what those words mean. So positive, I found it. Negative, I looked for it and did not find it. And treated, I looked for it and found it at the same time. The observation date is required. It defaults to the current date, but you can change that. So I can change this to maybe I saw it yesterday. Infested areas, survey area, habitat, all of these, rest of these options in the infestation section are optional. But again, the more information you provide, the more useful these records are to a broader audience. I'm not going to go through all the different options that exist in these. Like I said, a lot of these have tooltips, which are these little question mark icons that you can scroll over and get some more information. Some of them also walk you through how to use a particular tool. With regards to the location, so it automatically filled in state. It automatically zooms to Massachusetts on this little map here. If I pick a county, it's going to zoom that map further in to that particular county. That's all that's required. A state and a county, that's all that's required. Your data won't show up on point level maps. Your data won't be downloadable as a shape file. We don't put in artificial county centroids. So it's just this species existed in this county somewhere. You can hand enter in latitude and longitude, or you can use these icons at the top of the map to indicate I'm dropping a point, and it automatically fills in the latitude and longitude. You can clear that. You can say, I want to draw a line instead, and you double click to end the line. It uses the centroid of the latitude and longitude for that shape to fill in that. Or you can draw a polygon. And again, it'll fill in the latitude and longitude. The interesting thing about drawing a polygon is if you go up to the infestation section, it fills in that infested area. So that's a nice feature that we have where it automatically calculates that infested area. You can add additional information about where you saw it, or if there's limited access, things like that. This field is very important, private. So private specifically governs the coordinates, the shape. If you provide coordinates, a shape, so forth with a record, those are publicly available unless you select yes for private. If you select yes for private, the data is available to the public at only a county level. So you still have those coordinates, you still have that location, but those are not publicly available. This is very useful if, say, you're in a sensitive habitat area, you're on private land, for some reason you don't want those coordinates in the public realm. You can still provide data, but protect those particular coordinates. And then finally, you can add images. These are very important in the data review process. And then additional any comments or specimen information and so forth. The images are, again, very important for the record review process. So in some databases, records are just available. And they say that the data is either expert data or unreviewed or something like that. With iNaturalist, the data is available and the community can participate in the identification. That can be interesting at times. Sometimes it's very good and sometimes there's a lot of mistakes being made because of various reasons. I like iNaturalist. I use it for a lot of things. It's a great, fun tool to use. With EDDMapS specifically, the data is reviewed by specific people, usually local people, local experts participating in the some way in the invasive species community. So it can be people with the Department of Natural Resources, Department of Transportation, Parks Department, so forth. These people participate as verifiers, and if they say, yes, this is correct, if they fix the species, if they say, okay, this is a negative record, you look for it, you did not find it, then those data become available to the public. The data is not available until a verifier either says it is or it comes from an expert source like a herbarium. So the images are very important, but you'll notice they are not required. Once you're satisfied with the amount of data you've provided, you can submit your report. Again, the report is not available to the public when you submit it. It has to be reviewed. If you're interested in the review process, if you go to our tools and training page, we have a lot of materials on the website on specific topics like reviewing data, uploading bulk data, and so forth. There are a lot of resources available here. So with regards to getting data out, on the tools and training page, there is a link called Advanced Query Tools. This is where we recommend people go to download data. This is downloading only the verified data. If you want to download your own data, you can go into My EDDMapS, and there's a download option in there, and that'll download your own data as well as for unreviewed as well as reviewed records. And it will include the coordinates. So because it's your own data, you can have those coordinates. But with regards to just anybody being interested in data, you can click on Advanced Query Tools and you can fill out the parameters here. And you can fill out any number of parameters. The more parameters you fill out, the more specific the data is. I'm just going to say Virginia Master Naturalist Priority Species List. I'm going to pick that one. And I'm going to limit that to Virginia because that's where it makes sense. And I'm going to click Submit. And so this is just a very basic query for a list of species in a state. And it tells you what your result summary is. The numbers can be a little confusing because of we allow people to submit revisit records. So they went back to that location later. and we're documenting that as a separate concept as new records and so forth. So this is the list of your parameters on the left, and this is the map that shows up, and you can treat it just like you were treating the other point map. We need to change the icons, those got missed. We just updated the icons for the other map. So to download the data, it's these 3 icons at the top. I really, really recommend either just the CSV or the shapefile if you care about the actual data, if you want to interact with the data in any way. If literally all you're concerned with is points and shapes on a map, then the KML is fine. You'll notice that the records are not different colors for the different species. That is something you can do on your own with the shapefile. You can create maps with the shapefile that would have that kind of feature. When you click to download these data, it's actually going to send you an email with a link to download because we go through one request at a time. So it might take around 30 minutes, depending on the request queue. I'll briefly go over my EDDMapS, very briefly. So this is where you can interact with your data. You can upload bulk data, you can download data, you can interact with your own data. So if you get a request to add images to a record, or if you want to edit your record, you would go under reports. Likely everyone will just be submitting mapping records rather than revisit records. And if you click on mappings, it'll take you to those types of records, and you can, under the manage heading, view, edit, revisit, or delete your records. So you can add images, you can change, change the date if you need to, and so forth. So that's the website. That's the majority of what you're going to be interacting with on the website. Let me go through the app real quick. So I'm going to that button. So I'm going to be going over the EDDMapS app. It is literally just EDDMapS. There are a few other things, like as you can see, we have EDDMapS Pro, there's EDDMapS IPM, and so forth. This is the EDDMapS app that I'm going to be going over. When you first download it, and it is available on iPhone and Android, I'm displaying the Android version. They're very similar. There's a few differences, but they're very similar. It's going to ask you your state or province. It's currently set to Alberta for me, so I'm going to go into the menu and change my state or province. And I'll just pick Georgia because it's close to the top. And this is getting the field guide. So when we had those regional apps before, it was a set field guide, a set of species. With this particular app, you can change your state anytime you want and download the field guide for that state. This also allows us to have state-based field guides as well. Most places are going to have regional field guides. It makes a lot of sense, but with Florida being so different from South Carolina with regards to the species that are an issue, it wouldn't necessarily make sense to have the same species for those two different states. So Florida has its own list and so forth. The icons at the top are related to reporting. A new sighting is, I want to report something I saw. Negative survey, I looked for a list of things and did not find it in a specific area. Your upload queue is where your records are before uploading them to our database. And then below is where you can interact with information, images, and maps we have for those species. So let me just go through those really quick. So this is the list of species for Georgia. I'll click on, I'll just pick velvet leaf for now. This is the options for velvet leaf. This is the information we have about it. At the bottom, you see we have additional images. You can view the map. You can only see the map as it, if you have mobile signal. The map is a live map. You have to have signal to populate that map. In the top right, you can report the species. It'll take you right to the reporting form for it. And then this star is adding that to your My Species list. You can create a list of species that you're going to be specifically looking for or documenting a lot of. I'm just going to go ahead and back out of here. So I'm going to click on New Sighting. So this is the kind of super basic reporting form. There's no specificity to it yet because I have not chosen a subject. I'll select a subject, and at the bottom, you can see it's currently looking just at the species list for Georgia. If I click on this star, this is my list, and it says I currently don't have any species. If I click on the shape icons, these are the different categories, so I can look, I can look specifically in aquatic plants or birds or so forth. The time clock is your recently reported species, so I've recently reported velvet leaf and water fern and so forth. And then the search icon, the magnifying glass icon, if you're in Signal, if you're in mobile Signal, you can search our entire database for species. So if you see something really unusual that wouldn't really show, you wouldn't show up in a typical field guide. This is where you would kind of look for it. There's been a couple questions. Which EDDMapS app should we download to our phone? It's literally just EDDMapS. It's not EDDMapS Pro. It's not EDDMapS IPM. It's literally just EDDMapS. And then what determines what species show up on the field guide? That's determined by our partners in the various states and regions we work with. So they will let us know, hey, can you add this species? Or hey, can you take this one off? It's not what we thought it was going to be. So I'm just going to pick a plant. You'll notice it says add more plants. That's all you can do. You can only add more species if you're reporting a plant. This is a very touchy thing to use because when you're documenting the other information with this report, all of that is replicated across all those species. Every record in our database is one species at a location, at a date, and so forth. So anything you put, any images, any density, infested area, that will be replicated across all the records. So just use it very carefully. Because it could be confusing, or you could be, you just need to make sure that the data is correct for each report. When you add images, it's going to ask you from a picture, take a picture right then or choose from your gallery. It automatically fills in your observation date, but you can change that. You can click on it and change it. So I'll just say yesterday. Hide exact location. I think on the iPhone version, it's called private. That is the same concept. You're hiding your exact coordinates you're providing. So you can use that feature in the app. It is automatically zooming in on my latitude and longitude. I always recommend people look at the map to make sure that you are where it thinks you are. So I'm going to click on the map icon, and this tells me I'm at the University of Georgia. So that's where I am. If it's a little off, I have point currently selected, I can move the point around. If it's more accurate for me to draw a polygon, let me zoom out a little bit, then I can, let's say I'm in one of these fields over here. I can say I want to draw a polygon. With Android, you have freeform and vertices option. iPhone only has the vertices option. They're working on the freeform option. Something in a recent iPhone update kind of broke the freeform option. Freeform is literally, I'm just going to drag my finger around and it's going to draw it. I'm going to delete that. Vertices is I'm going to touch the corners of where it is, and it starts creating that polygon for me. If you're happy, you can say done, and it adds that polygon to your record. So see, it says user drawn polygon. And it automatically fills in that area as well. Time spent, so this is really useful for grant programs, documenting volunteer hours, documenting just how much time you're spending doing different things. So you can click time spent, and this is in minutes, and say how long you spent on this particular record. Infestation status, these are the same options we have gone over before: positive, treated, and negative. Habitat is just a very, very basic list of generic kind of habitats. Again, it's habitat, area, density, notes. These are optional fields. So you don't have to fill those out if you can't discern that type of data. So I'll just say there was 5 to 25% density. And then I can add additional comments if I want to. And when I click save, it's going to ask me if I want to include a photo, since I didn't. Photos are not required, but they're highly encouraged. In this case, I'm going to say no. And it adds that record to my upload queue. It doesn't automatically send that record to the database, because a lot of people work in really remote areas. So it adds the record to your upload queue. So when you get back home, when you get back to the office, when you get somewhere with Wi-Fi, you can upload those without costing your own data, and without, if you didn't have signal, draining your battery from it trying to continuously send those records. Negative survey, it's a much simpler form because you're not going to have density and so forth. You can pick multiple species. So I looked for hemlock woolly adelgid and gypsy moth and southern pine beetle. And you can choose from your list, you can search, so forth. Say done. So those 3 species I looked for. Time spent in minutes, I spent 30 minutes looking for those species. If you click on the bullseye icon in the top right of the area survey, it'll zoom you into where you are. To add your polygon or point, you would click edit. So right next to area survey, it says edit. This is where you can draw your point or drop your polygon. So I'm going to zoom in again, and I'm going to draw a polygon, and it's this area. Oh, I got to pick what kind. This area here is where I looked. And I say done. And there's my polygon. And then you can add additional notes. So what type of survey you did or anything else. And then you would click save. And so it's added that negative report in my upload queue. So it does separate these out, sightings and negative survey. And when I upload this negative survey with those 3 species, those are going to become 3 different records in our database. To edit a record, you can click on that particular record and it takes you to where you can edit it. So I don't want to edit this, so I'm going to go back. If you click on, and I think this is a little different for iPhone and Android. If you click on the square in Android, it lets you interact with these to either upload them or to delete them. I think in iPhone, it's an action button, like the word action. So if I upload these, it'll say, you'll get a message saying you've successfully uploaded these to the database. However, these are test records. These are bad records. I don't want to actually submit them. So I'm going to click the boxes. And in Android, you can select all by clicking the box and cutout outline at the top. The up arrow is upload. The trash icon is delete. So I'm going to delete these. If you have records in your upload queue for a day, 2 days, so forth, you'll get a notification on your phone saying, hey, by the way, you've got some uploads that are sitting in your upload queue. Do you want to, you should probably send those. So you will get reminders. And that's pretty much it for this particular app. So let's go back to the home page. So let me see here. If you click on new sighting, then submit a photo, will it identify the species for you? The answer is no. We would love to have machine identification, but we need a lot of funding to do that. We know how it's done, but it takes a lot of time and it takes man hours to do, and we have not had that opportunity at this point. So that's what the these field guides help you with. So let's look at Japanese chaff flower. This gives you information on how to identify it. So what the species looks like, and you can look at images. So you can say, okay, that does not look like alligator weed. They occur in a very similar habitat, but they look pretty different. So I've got that down. So those are to help you identify the species. So if you have, so Marie, you asked if I found the app, but there's no option to get the app or download it. There's only the option to open it in the App Store. That means you already have it downloaded. So if you click open, you have downloaded it at some point. Yes, no, this does not identify plants for you like iNaturalist does. iNaturalist does a pretty good job with a lot of species. There are some species which would be really hard to identify from just a photo, or have pretty variable forms. So there's a if you want to use iNaturalist to help you identify things, that's a good option. But at this point, like I said, no, we do not have that machine learning help for identifying species. Can you explain density and what you mean by 25%? This is so you're going to draw an area theoretically. So if I go to new sighting and I click, if I want to, drop a point or draw a polygon, how much of, okay, I need to pick a species first. So there we go. So you can say density is the volume in the area. How much it's like percent cover, how much of the area is infested with this particular species. So is it less than 5%? So there's just like a few plants here or there. More than 50% means there is a lot of it in that particular area. Let me see if I'm, where can we find details about the models used to generate the future range maps? And is it possible to see what the individual literature references are for a species distribution? Okay, I'm not sure about the second one. I need a little more clarification on that particular question, but the models were done, the maps were created by Jenica Allen, who is, I believe, with Mount Holyoke at this point. And she can answer questions about the models that were used. So if you're asking about individual literature for references for a species distribution, when a record is submitted to EDDMapS, you can see other people's records that have been reviewed, and you can see who it came from. With literature records, let me see if I can pull one of those up real quick. So with literature records, those are going to have the source they came from. So I know there were some with euphorbia. So it'll just take a second, and let's look at one literature. And we'll pick a county that only has literature record. So it'll be yellow. So we'll pick one of these South Dakota counties. Come on. Oh, that's not working. I'll have to ask about that. Okay, it's one of the, let's go back to distribution. So it'll have in there what that reference is. I think it was one of these kind of counties here. So this came from the Biota of North America program. The reference is the NAPAS pest tracker. And so in this particular case, that's the literature source for this particular record. If this came from an individual person, it would either have their name or it would have you can report anonymously. And so if you wanted to report anonymously, or if someone reported anonymously, it would say something along the lines of EDDMapS reporter. Maiden is an app for the Mid-Atlantic states. Does it use a separate database? No. That app is going away though. It will no longer be supported. So MAPIC and a few other groups got together and said, hey, we want an app. We want to record things in our region. And so we worked with them on creating the Maiden app, and we supported it and maintained it, but Maiden app is going away. So we are telling people to use the EDDMapS app. It's a lot better. So if Beth told me today, hey, I need you to add these 5 species, I can add them, and she can have that updated in her app today, probably within an hour, maybe less. If I added them, she would have them about within an hour. With the Maiden app, with the Outsmart Invasives app and so forth, you would have to update the entire app. You would have to submit the app for updating to Android and to Apple. They would have Apple would have to approve it. Android doesn't approve apps. Apple would have to approve it, and then it would become available. So this is a much better system. Someone asked what program I'm using to show off the app. I'm using a Samsung specific program that isn't available anymore called SideSync. There is another program that is usable, but for some reason I can't get it working on my computer, called Samsung Flow. But there are other types of screencasting apps and programs that you can use. But that's specifically what I'm using in this case. Well, I guess we're already into the questions round. So
Yes, I think we are, Rebecca.
so,
So if anyone has any additional questions, please send them into the Q&A.
yeah, so let me just, while we're waiting for more questions, sorry, I meant to say apps. So this website isn't as up to date as I would like, but if you do go, I'll go to the Play Store. So this is the EDDMapS app. It's this red icon. You'll see there is EDDMapS Pro there. That's a completely different app, but anybody can use it, but it is a completely different app. It has no field guide. It's something we can go over at some point if some people get into conducting revisits and so forth. But for right now, I was just going over the EDDMapS app. So if you click on this, it's currently installed on my phone, so it says it's installed. So yes, we have, like I said, there's a few other apps that have EDDMapS in the name, but this one is just EDDMapS. And yeah, I see that Beth mentioned how to get the My Species list. So I'll just show that live real quick.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah,
Rebecca,
so
thanks.
yeah, in My EDDMapS, you can go on the left black bar to My Species list. And this is where you can add species one by one, or you can add a whole list. So in this case, we named it the Virginia Master Naturalists Priority Species List. It's a little long, but it gets the point across. So if I click that, and then I add list, it added all those species to that list. So if I go back to the app, let's go back, getting out of there, and I'm going to go to my settings, and we'll just try refreshing the field guide. Maybe that'll refresh everything. And then go to my species list. there they are. So before it was empty, and now it's been added. So someone asked, if you are asked to add more photos from a verifier, how do you install a photo in that report? So as I mentioned before, you interact with your submitted data through the, I'm in my EDDMapS. I'm going to click on reports. I'm going to click on mappings. And here is where you can see your records. So you can go to the record you want to and click edit. And here's where you can add photos and click submit, and those are added. Most often what happens when you get asked to add photos, you're going to get an email that says, hey, a verifier has asked you to add photos. Here is a link to add photos. If you click the link, it takes you to that exact records edit page. And then you can scroll down to the bottom and add photos and click submit. And when you do that, they'll get a notification saying more images have been added. So you have to take a photo and then do this clunky step. Is that referring to adding more photos to a record? If so, yes. So we don't have all the existing records on the app. And oftentimes, since we work with so many people who are in remote areas, they wouldn't be able to access them anyway in a live manner. So it's really recommended if you're gonna take photos to add them when you take the record itself. So when you're creating a record in the app on the website, it's really recommended that you add photos at that time. So there are a couple people who've asked in the past. We are not getting the coordinates from the metadata from photos. It's using your live GPS. So if you are taking photos and then going home and then creating records, it's going to say you're at your house. Because it's using your live GPS location. So as I mentioned, you can choose a photo from gallery. This is probably going to be a lot of pictures of my dog. So yeah, it's a lot of pictures of my dog. Let's go back. Or you can take a photo live and it'll just open up your camera. So it does need access to your camera, and it will, you can see my tea mug there. And so you can take a photo live and it will ask you, are you satisfied with that photo? You want to retry? So the options at the top are retry or okay. I'll just say okay. And then it will add it to that report at that time. And you can add as many images as you want.
I think that's all of our questions. Any last minute questions from the audience? All right. Rebekah, oh, well, we have one that popped up.
I looked at Leafy Spurge in Virginia. EDDMapS is showing nothing. Yeah. So if you look at the distribution maps for Leafy Spurge in Virginia, you're probably, I think there was only a few records in the whole state. If you know where Leafy Spurge is in Virginia, we'd be more than happy to take that data. So this is literally just looking at the data in EDDMapS. There is no accessing herbarium records that are not in EDDMapS. So data has to be contributed to EDDMapS, or it has to be gotten from public databases by me. So I have gone to different public databases and downloaded the data. We also do get iNaturalist data. It does not get dumped into our database. A verifier has to look at those data and make the decision to add it or not. The reason is I have seen a number of records of species being confused and still reaching research grade. So someone reported something that kind of looks like calorie pear, but it had the name tallow tree. And they kind of have a similar leaf shape, but those are not the same species. But it did reach research grade status with that. The other thing is a lot of people use iNaturalist to take pictures of planted specimen, but they don't mark those as planted specimens. So they reach research grade, even though it's a planted Nandina or a planted Japanese barberry. And we don't want that data in EDDMapS because someone planted it. It didn't get there in some other way. So the verifiers are able to look at those records and say, okay, well, I'm gonna really look intensely at the crepe myrtle records, because there are some instances where crepe myrtle is starting to be found in places it hasn't been planted. But the vast majority of the data in iNaturalist is going to be planted specimens of crepe myrtle. So we allow the verifiers that step to prevent those planted records from coming in. The other thing with iNaturalist is, and again, I use iNaturalist. I document all kinds of fun insects and native plants I'm finding. Unless you're taking data as part of a project and specifically adding in fields from that project, the only data coming from iNaturalist is the reporter, the date, the subject, and a little bit about like adult or some other things, but there's no abundance information. And you cannot draw a polygon in iNaturalist. So if you're trying to delineate an area of invasion, it's more useful to use something like EDDMapS as opposed to iNaturalist. So about all we're getting from iNaturalist is presence data, unfortunately.
All right, Rebekah, we have a couple more questions, but I would like to make sure that we end promptly at 1. Could you quickly answer these, and then I'll finish up?
So if you take a picture in the field and save coordinates and hit save and upload later, will the report have the correct latitude and longitude? So if I'm in here and I save this with those coordinates, and I go to the upload queue and I upload them from my house instead of my office or wherever I took it, it's going to have those coordinates from where you saved that record. So if you're going out in the field and you take 30 points of data and you save it, and then you go back to your office or home at the end of the day and upload those 30 records, those are going to have the points from when you were out in the field. They're not going to have the points from your house or your office. Compare the comprehensiveness of species data on EDDMapS versus USDA plants. Would you recommend any other incidence data source on a particular species we're trying to map? So EDDMapS has the USDA plants database in it. It has USDA, it has the BONAP database, it has US Forest Service data, it has some national park data. We try to recruit data from a wide variety of sources. So we do have the USDA plants database as it was maybe 8 years ago. There have been some fluctuations in staff at the plants database office, I guess you would say. And so sometimes there are people there working on some things we could find useful, and sometimes there aren't. So I think that covers that concept.
Okay, thank you, Rebekah. Well, that'll be our final question for you today. And so I have a couple of slides I'd like to share with you all before closing out today. So let me cue that up quickly. I'll start my video. All right. So before we close today, I wanted to introduce you to Blue Ridge PRISM's new project, the Virginia Invasive Mapping Initiative, with our partners, the Virginia Master Naturalist and the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, Natural Heritage. And we are working with Rebekah to train Virginia Master Naturalists and other interested citizen scientists to collect data using EDDMapS on the presence and movement of invasive species across Virginia. Just want to make sure that I'm actually sharing my screen. Can somebody tell me if you can see my screen, please?
We see it.
Okay. Thank you, Rod. It wasn't giving me the green box and I was a little confused about that. So we are working with Rebekah to train Virginia Master Naturalists and other interested citizen scientists to collect data using EDDMapS on the presence and movement of invasive species across Virginia. Documenting that spread is essential for informing public policy, determining whether an escaped plant is becoming environmentally harmful, public education, and decisions on management and control of invasive plants. Blue Ridge PRISM and our partners are interested in all invasive plants listed on the Virginia invasive plant list. Let me pull that up for you. And we've also identified 20 plants of interest to help focus our mapping efforts. And Rebekah mentioned this during her presentation and reviewed how to access this, this list in EDDMapS. But here's our 20 non-native plants of interest. And you'll look for the Virginia Master Naturalist Priority Species List in EDDMapS under the My Species list. And I wanted to refer you to Blue Ridge PRISM's website where we have more details on this project, mapping resources, some YouTube videos from EDDMapS on how to use the app, a little bit more detail walkthrough with another representative from Bugwood. And there's also links to identification of our 20 plants of interest. And if you are a Virginia Master Naturalist joining us today, you can learn more about the Master Naturalist project called Documenting Escaped Non-Native Plants with EDDMapS. Susan McLaughlin is the contact there. And if you're involved with that project, you should already have her contact information. If not, you can feel free to reach out to me and I can connect you with Susan. So to close our program today, I just want to say thank you so much to Rod, William, and Rowena for helping with this event. And thank you very, very much to Rebekah for joining us today to share her expertise and work with this important program, EDDMapS. And thank you to everyone for spending their afternoon with us. And I just would like to mention that Blue Ridge PRISM is supported by the Virginia Environmental Endowment and donors like you. And your continued support enables us to bring events like this to you and across the state of Virginia. And lastly, upon leaving the Zoom webinar today, you will see an exit survey. Please take a moment and share your thoughts. Let us know how we did and any suggestions for new content or things that we can bring to you to help managing invasive species easier for you. So yeah, let us know how you did, and you have to exit the webinar to actually see the survey. So with that, I will close today.
Sorry, I remembered something that was specifically requested that I talk about, and it'll just take 1 minute.
Okay, if you all can hang on. Yeah, go ahead,
sorry,
Rebekah.
sorry. So sometimes people think the data in EDDMapS just kind of goes into the ether, but this specific project they're working on gives you a great idea of how the data is being used in a practical sense. It's being used to recruit information to decide a plan of action. So should these species still be available? The data in EDDMapS was used to help create those maps that I was showing for the where species are going to be in 20 to 40 years. Data is used in research. It's used in all kinds of decision-making things. So I just really wanted to make sure that everyone knew that the data is actively being used. It's not just, oh, look, it's a pretty map. It's actively being used by a wide variety of people for a huge number of reasons.
Yes, yes, it is. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for bringing, elaborating on that point. And it's used by the Natural Heritage Program to help do their invasive assessments and developing lists like the Virginia Invasive Species List. And it's also used, Jim Hurley mentioned in the comments earlier that it's used by the Noxious Weeds Committee and those of us who help to prepare noxious weeds assessments to take to that committee to have a plant deemed as a noxious weed in Virginia. So it's really important information. And the more accurate and the more current it is, the more useful the data is. All right. Well, with that, we're at 1 o'clock. So thank you everyone for joining us today. This was a great presentation. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Blue Ridge PRISM leadership, volunteers and staff. And if you have any questions, send us an email, info@blueridgeprism.org. And we'll send out a follow-up email of this program in the next few days. So watch your inboxes for that. And with that, have a wonderful afternoon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Beth.